Hi everyone, I'm Joanna Penn from thecreativepenn.com, and today I'm interviewing Rachel Abbott. Rachel is the author of suspense thriller Only the Innocent, which reached #1 on amazon.co.uk and continues to remain in the top 100 books on Kindle in multiple categories 5 months after launch. Rachel is British, but she lives in Italy, and she shares her knowledge about book marketing generously on her brilliant blog. So welcome, Rachel.
Hi, nice to see you.
Yeah, and we were just saying it looks like a lovely day in Italy today while it's raining in London.
Oh, it is absolutely gorgeous, but actually we haven't had the weather that we normally have in spring, even here in Italy. It's been lovely normally in April and May, it's gorgeous, but April was very disappointing, so we're really pleased to see the sunshine now.
Oh, poor you. Right, so why don't you start by telling people a little bit more about you and where did you come from? You're just kind of this writing sensation. Give us a bit more about your writing history.
Well, for many years I ran an interactive media company in England, and I wrote all the time there, but it was a different sort of writing. I used to write a lot of creative proposals because we obviously had to try and win work, so we did work for hire basically. It was mainly educational stuff, but we did quite a bit of entertainment as well. So for example, we produced a version of Cluedo, or Clue as it's known in the States, for interactive media. It was the first one, and so I was very heavily involved in the scripting and the design of that. So I did quite a lot of scripting and a lot of creative writing as well, but I never had time to write a novel. And then in 2000 I sold my business, but I carried on working for the company that had bought us, and I carried on working for them for about 5 years actually. But in the meantime we restored this property in Italy where we now live, and we started to, I can't not run a business. I seem to have this I have to run a business kind of attitude. So we then made it into it's quite a big house, so we started to rent it out for holidays and weddings, and then we restored another house. So it all kind of got a bit out of control really. And then a couple of years ago I'd got some spare time in the winter, and I thought at last I'm actually going to be able to write my novel. So I'd had the idea in my head for a long time, but I then started to do the planning and tried to work out all the little details and all the bits that make it more than just one story, all the different characters and how they all interact with each other. And that's what I did. I sat down and wrote it.
Which is fantastic. And then, so you wrote this book, and then it appears at #1 on the Amazon store. Did it go like that?
It wasn't quite as straightforward as that. I'd love to say that it was as easy as that. But to start off with, I decided I was going to try the traditional route, as most people do. And I decided that I was going to try and get an agent. And so I did send off, I don't know, probably about 5 or 6 copies to agents, but I didn't have any joy at all. I got quite a bit of interest, but basically the ones that were interested then said that they didn't think that they would be able to place it with a publisher because they didn't think that this was what readers were looking for at the moment. And so I didn't do anything with it after that for a couple of years. I'd written it for my own benefit really. I didn't really write it to get it published. It was when lots of people read it, when friends and family read it and said, you've got to do something with this. And so I looked at KDP then, but it didn't seem like it was a real possibility. Because to start off with, when they first launched KDP, you could only actually publish, I think, if you lived in America.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And then they opened it up.
I did. Yeah, because you had to have a US tax code, and you had to have a US bank account. And so I thought, oh, never mind, I'll just leave it. And then it was only really last October that I discovered that you could actually publish for the Kindle in the UK. So I literally just thought, oh, well, I'll have a go then. And it was no bigger an idea than that. I had some time. And so I thought, right, well, I'll just do it and see what happens. And that's what I did. But of course, it's never as simple as that. You can't just publish a book on Kindle and just hope that it's all going to work.
And we'll come back to the marketing side in a minute. But I just, maybe you could just tell people a bit more about the book, because I've read it and it's got really good kind of bad guy who's also dead. But tell people a bit more about the book so they know what we're talking about.
Well, the idea for the book, I actually wanted to write a book about a murder, obviously. But I wanted the man to be murdered by a woman. And so the way I'd been thinking about this for the years before I wrote it was, what is so bad? What set of circumstances are so bad that somebody has no other choice? It had to be the only option. In fact, it was going to be called The Only Option, but I found that there was another book called The Only Option, so I changed my mind. But the whole thing was based around the idea of a woman having to kill a man because it was the only way out of a certain situation. And so that's what the whole thing is about. It starts with the murder, so I'm not giving anything away at all, because it's clear from the very beginning that the murderer is a woman.
That's true.
It's not clear which woman, but it's clear that the murderer is a woman. And so the whole book is about really uncovering, not really who the murderer was, although you do uncover that, but it's more about why. It's why somebody would murder somebody. And I think that, to me, that's much more interesting than how or when or who even. It's the why that I find particularly interesting.
Yeah, and I also like the fact that even though it had some quite, it has a lot of nasty backstory, it's not graphic, horrible graphic violence, which, you get in some of these crime books that makes me not want to read, on. I think it's well done, crime in a well done way.
Oh, I'm glad you think that, because, there are some fairly difficult topics that it touches on, but I always think that it's better when things are left to the imagination. I'll never forget reading, I can't remember what the book's called now, which is really bad. It's the one where the horse's head is in the bed.
Oh, so The Godfather.
The Godfather, thank you. I just couldn't remember for the moment. And I remember reading that, and I literally shivered from head to foot when I read it because of what my imagination did. And when I saw the film, I just thought, oh, right, there's a horse's head in the bed. It had no meaning, but the way that it was written, it was so subtle that, you got the sense of it rather than having it all graphically laid out for you. So I try to give the sense of what's happening without necessarily spelling everything out.
No,
that's the idea.
No, it's great. So let's talk. Go back to the fact that you're a businesswoman, and this comes across in your blog, where you absolutely lay out how you've done a lot of the marketing. So I'll send people there, but we're going to talk about some of that. So as a businesswoman, how did you approach this whole, sales and marketing activity?
Well, I suppose to start with, I was pretty bad, to be honest, because I hadn't realised that ideally you actually start a lot of this before you publish your book. I hadn't done anything. I've got 9 followers on Twitter, and that was about. And I had created a website, but I'd done nothing to it for 2 years. I just created it when I'd finished the book, and then because I'd done nothing with the book, I did nothing with the website, and so I published the book, and I got quite a few early sales because I know quite a lot of people, so they all bought it, and that was quite exciting. And then, of course, nothing. It wasn't linked to any other books. You know how on Amazon you see customers who bought this book also bought this book. Well, there was nothing linked to mine at all. And I thought, well, this is not good enough. I'm going to have to get my act together here. So I started to do a lot of research. But what I found was I was spending so much time doing research, I wasn't actually doing anything. I was just researching, if that makes sense, and coming up with, oh, that would be a good idea. Oh, there's so many things you could do.
Yeah.
So in the end, I actually sat down and wrote a business plan. I wrote a marketing plan. Sorry, not a full business plan. I wrote a marketing plan and tried to allocate my time so that I was going to spend X amount of time on Twitter, and I needed to work out how I was going to follow and be followed by the right sorts of people. People who were interested in books. There's no point me being followed by somebody who's interested in football. I need to be followed by people who are interested in books. So I spent a lot of time working out how to do that. I'm pretty rubbish with Facebook, and I must get better at that. But Twitter worked very well for me, and people say, oh, you don't sell many books through Twitter, but when you're first starting, it's not really the numbers, it's the quality, really. It's people who've read a lot of other books, because then your book starts to get linked.
Yeah.
And that made a big difference to me. And then forums, the Amazon forum and Goodreads forums, both of those. I've managed to chat to lots of people. I didn't just talk about my book. I just managed to chat to people, and so that worked really well as well.
That's interesting. Okay, so you've said Twitter there, but you've also said the forums. Now, yes. I love Twitter, and it's probably my favourite thing for connecting. Like, we connected on Twitter, yes. But the forums, I know, like, I should be in the forums, but I'm almost. It seems to me a really massive time thing. So how did you tackle the forums, and how much time did you spend there?
Well, I'm very fortunate in that I have no other job. So for people who are working full time and trying to do this, I don't know how they do it. I think some of them are absolutely amazing, that they write and they chat in forums and they're on Twitter, and they then have a full-time job and probably a couple of kids. And I think, how on earth does anybody do it? So they have my absolute respect. But because I was able to dedicate my 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, I probably spent about an hour a day on forums, probably no more than that, but about an hour a day. And what really surprised me was I would chat to people in forums, because obviously if you're talking about your book, you can only go on the Meet Our Authors forum. You can't chat about it anywhere else now on the Amazon forums. But one day there was a big leap in my sales, and I put something on one of the forums, I don't know what's happened today. And one of the people I've been chatting to said, follow this link. And she gave me a link to another forum, which was a readers forum. But a lot of the people I'd been chatting to on the authors forum were also members of this readers forum. And everybody was talking about Only the Innocent. And it was, whoa, what's happened here? So that was really great. And the other thing I did quite a lot of was I sent off a lot of review requests. Yeah. And I did very formal review requests. I've had review requests that have literally just said review request. Yeah. That's the name of the book. And you think, well, that's really helpful. But I sent off very, with a picture of the front cover, all the blurb about the book, how many words it was, how much it sold for, where they could buy it from, what reviews it had had, and so on. And I managed to get quite a lot of reviews from sort of high-level reviewers, people who are recognised as reviewers. Obviously the readers' reviews are every bit as important, but getting those others meant that probably the words were spread a bit more.
So yeah, and I'm going to link to your post on that, because you have very nice, as you say, very professional layout of your book reviews. But how did you find the people to target for those reviews? Because I know a lot of people struggle with that. They don't know how to find the right people to review.
Yeah, I'm not sure that everybody that I found was the right person to review, but basically Google. I did loads of Google searches, and then I come across a site that maybe listed half a dozen other sites. So I added all of those to the list as well, and I created a comprehensive list of them. And then what else did I do with that? Oh, and on the same blog post about how I did my reviews, there's now a massive list for anybody who wants it of reviewers that were sent to me by one of the guys who I've been chatting to on Twitter, and he's compiled this huge list of reviewers. And the problem is that not everybody bothers to read the submission guidelines, so they just fire off a review request without reading what particular interests people have, and that doesn't do them any favours, really. So I was quite careful. I looked at what they wanted, whether they asked for anything specific, what format they wanted, and just made sure that I could deliver really on what they wanted. And I also offered to do interviews or spotlights or a blog post, something so that for people who are bloggers, it makes it a bit easier for them to accept you as a book to review. It gives them a bit more, really. Yeah.
And you did all of that before you were Amazon #1, right? So you weren't in a powerful position at that point.
Oh no, far from it. I mean, in January, at the beginning of January, in fact, I can remember being in England for Christmas, and I had to check on my phone. I had to check my sales on my phone, which was fun. But I was checking my Amazon sales, and I can remember that on, I think, Christmas Day, I sold 6 copies, and I thought that was fantastic because prior to that, I was selling 1 or 2 a day. You know, so even in January, I was selling probably 10 a day, and then it just suddenly went berserk at the end of January, beginning of February. So it got to #1 on the 18th of February.
Yeah, and I think from everything you've said so far, you know, you can really tell that you went about this quite strategically. You know, like you didn't just jump on Twitter and start tweeting. You know, you were actually quite strategic about these different things. Was there anything you think you didn't get right, like something you wouldn't do again?
So, although I probably, let me think now, I wouldn't, there's nothing that I did that I wouldn't do, but there are things that I would do more of. There are things that I would start sooner. So I would definitely start to try to build some interest in my book before I launched it. I would also do some advanced copies to reviewers in the hope that I could get some people ready to review it pretty early on. I did actually get quite a few people who read it very quickly and reviewed it very quickly. You know, then there was the big lull, and then they started to flow again. So it's a risk, you know. If you put your strategy all around reviews, you have to accept the fact that you might get bad reviews. Fortunately, I didn't for Only the Innocent. I didn't get any bad reviews, and actually until it had been at #1 for 2 weeks, then I started to get the odd one. But I think that's kind of inevitable, really.
It is.
But what I would do is I would do much more up front. I would have everything much better planned. So I would definitely have got more reviews. I definitely have people interested on Twitter. And that's the sort of thing that I would do. I would do more with my Facebook page. I do nothing with that at the moment. There are lots and lots of other things that I could set up to start to create the interest before it goes live, really.
So, and did you do ebook only, or did you have print as well?
I only did ebook. The print copies that I had at the London Book Fair were printed for me by Amazon, by KDP, so that I could do a book signing. So I haven't got a print version at the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm interested. I just read your blog post on the book fair, which you put up recently. And one of the interesting things you say on there, you know, is how there's still some feelings between traditional and indie. But also, you mentioned how you still think that traditional would give you a quality product. So maybe you can talk a bit more about what you're feeling about the indie traditional thing at the moment.
Well, I think that I can actually understand why it was difficult for agents to take Only the Innocent, because it is, I mean, I class it as a psychological thriller, but, you know, some people have said it's a police procedural, which I find very strange, but, you know, some people think that that's what it is because there are police involved and they do go through a procedure, and so it doesn't exactly fit into an obvious genre, which I think was an issue with it. However, I think that traditional publishers have got an awful lot to offer. So, for example, since having an agent, she has been absolutely amazing in helping me to improve my writing. Yeah. So, you know, she's been through Only the Innocent with a black pen. Change this, do this, make this more narrative, make this more emotional, you know. And it's like, oh, right, okay. And it's helped me so much. And I think that that's why the traditional publishers, I think they've got a huge amount to offer. And even if I was going to produce something as if my next book, if I decide to publish that independently again, I would still go through the process now of having an editorial review, I think, because I am now very aware of where things could have been better, to be honest. And I think that traditional publishers have got a huge amount to offer in that respect. And also, I do like the idea of seeing my book in a bookshop, if I'm honest. You know, something nice about that as well. But having said that, you know, I think that if you are an author and you've written a book and you can't get somebody who is interested in it, or if they are, they're not interested in really giving you very much assistance, then I would definitely say go for it, go the indie route. But you have to be prepared to do the marketing, otherwise it's just going to be exactly the same as it would be with, you know, a book in a bookstore where there's just one copy of your book hidden on the back shelf somewhere.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I'm with you on the editorial. I mean, I hire editors as well, but I can see that, you know, that it's much harsher when you go with a traditional publisher. You know, they're much harder on you. So it's great your agent's doing that at the moment. And of course, you are writing the next book, aren't you? So are you going to query that before you indie?
Am I going to what, sorry?
Are you going to query it with traditional publishers before you go indie with it?
I'm going to let my agent advise me on that, I think.
Yeah.
I know how well it's done as an indie book with Only the Innocent. I know how well that's done. There's no guarantee, of course, that I can replicate that.
Yeah.
You can't guarantee that. A lot of people have done well with the first book, and then the second book hasn't done quite so well. So, I can't be... I'm not so arrogant that I think, oh, well, I'm going to do the same with the next one, because I really don't know. I think the next one will probably be, hopefully will be better written, in the sense that I will have a lot of advice and a lot of input. So that's a good thing. That's a thing in its favour. And I've also got a lot of people who are quite keen to read the next book. So that will help as well, because it will actually help to get it hopefully noticed quite early on. But I've not made a decision which way to go with it yet at all. I think I'm a long way from making that decision, because, they might look at it and think, I don't like this. So in which case I would definitely go indie and be very happy with it.
Yeah, and I think that attitude is exactly what I like as well, which is this kind of, there's positive choices here. It's not about, the last resort. It's about, the choice for your book and how you feel. And I think that puts a much more positive spin, entrepreneurial spin on the whole thing.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. I think that it is a positive choice. And I will make a positive choice based on all the information that I have to hand at the time. So if there is a publisher interested in it, and if I like what they're suggesting, the way forward. I mean, I'm not just talking about the size of the advance, which is what everybody thinks it's based on, but it's not just that, is it?
No.
It's what they want to do with it, how they want to play it. There's the whole story really behind it. If they're just going to take it and just stick it on the back shelf somewhere in the shop, then I don't want to do that.
Yeah. And
so it depends on exactly how they would want to play it. I think that's how I would make my decision.
No, great one. So I also wanted to ask you about ebook pricing, because this comes back and back, and I'm always trying to ask people about this because it's such a difficult question. I change my price whenever I read a blog post now that says, I think now books should be $4.99, and I'm like, yeah, they're right, and I go and change my book, and then I'm like, no, it should be 99 cents, and I go up and down and up and down. What do you think?
So I think that 99 cents or 99 pence is not. I don't think that is really enough for a book, considering the amount of work and effort that's gone into it. Having said that, I launched my book at £1.99, and then I, like you, got a bit, is that going to be too much? Are people going to think, never heard of this author, not prepared to spend £2 on this book? So I did drop my price to 99 pence for about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Just leading to when it got to number one. Then I put the price back up. I left it a few days because I didn't want people to think, oh, right, she's just profiteering here.
Yeah.
So I waited till it had been at number one for about 3 or 4 days, and then I put the price up to £1.99. It didn't make any difference at all.
Yeah.
It didn't make any difference at all to the sales. But maybe it got there because it was 99 pence and people didn't even have to think about it. So I think that it's an easy purchase. If somebody's never heard of you, it makes it a very, very easy purchase. I find it difficult to understand why. Well, I don't find it difficult to understand why, but I know publishers often charge a much higher price, much more akin to the price of the book. And in some respects, I understand that, because obviously they've had all these books printed and they don't want everybody to just download the Kindle version or the iTunes version or whatever. But I think that as somebody who owns a Kindle, I generally steer towards the books that are at the lower end of the scale, unless it is an author that I know well. So if somebody brings out a book and I know that author and I know I'm going to enjoy it, 100% guaranteed, then I'll pay the asking price. If it's somebody that I've never heard of before, I'm very dubious about spending more than maybe £3. I would say, £3 is probably my limit for a book from somebody I've never heard of before. And yet, funnily enough, when I was buying a paperback, that wasn't the case. When it was a paperback, I would buy a book that cost more from somebody I've never read before.
It is an interesting thing, isn't it? And I'm probably the same. And I've had this argument with publishing people, and I've said, look, it's not, when they say, oh well, it's, you go to the cinema and pay £15 or whatever, £10, and I'm like, well, I buy how many books? I buy a book a day. Sometimes I buy more than one book a day. This is not a casual reader we're talking about. This is I am eating this stuff, so I can't afford to buy £10 books every day. So that's why I'm reading so much more on the Kindle, but because they're cheaper price. And I will admit to buying yours because of the cheaper price, having not, and probably when you were in the top 10 as well, it was like, there's a book, it's popular, it's cheap, buy now. Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. It does. So yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I do think the 99-cent 99p price has its place. Clearly, if you'd have had another 2 books like Amanda Hocking, when she had her one at 99 and then 2 at 2.99 and 2 at 4.99, you'd be the millionaire. Next time.
Yeah, no, it's a difficult one, I think. So I do think that £1.99 is a sensible sort of price for somebody that you've never heard of before. And I think that if you can get the ratings and you've got a £1.99 price. If I was to do another one, I certainly wouldn't go above £3. I would go somewhere between £1.99 and £2.99, maybe £2.50 or something. But something that makes it a relatively easy purchase for people.
Yeah.
And for me, as an independent author, then my costs are minimal, really. And so it doesn't seem unreasonable.
No, brilliant. So we've talked about a whole load of different things, kind of ranged over everything. But I'll point people to your series of blog posts on all of your marketing. But is there one standout thing you want to share with people as we close, to sort of encourage them or give them some advice?
That's a good one. So would I actually give anybody any advice? So the advice I would give people is go for it. Don't be shy. Go for it. Because I think that, it's so easy to think, oh, well, I'm not sure that I could do this and so on. But I think it's definitely, even if you only sell a few copies, it's better than you would have done otherwise. So I think it's definitely worth the trouble. I would say that you've got to be prepared to put some work in. I think that's the big thing. You've got to be, if you want it to do well, you've got to be prepared. But you need to work out what works for you and what doesn't. So, for example, the other day I was chatting to a guy who had written a book about a certain part of the UK. And so he went there at a busy weekend and put loads of flyers on people's cars, and actually got some really good sales as a result of it. And, so that's his way of doing things. And he also goes to talk to book clubs and sets up talks in libraries and things like that. So you don't have to just be into social media. I think before you start, you need to think about whether you can do it or not. Because I get lots and lots of emails from people, as I'm sure you do too, to say, I don't understand why my book's not selling. You've sold so many and I haven't sold any. What am I doing wrong? So you say, well, what are you doing? Well, it's a really good book, and I've had 3 5-star reviews, but they're doing nothing. Yeah. And I think that Amazon, for example, offers so many ways for your book to be seen through links to other books, that you just have to be prepared to spend the time working out how that might happen. And there's lots and lots of advice on that, including on my blog. And then take the time and trouble to actually work out what works for you. Because, you know, I like Twitter, I like chatting on Twitter, I like chatting in forums. Not everybody does. Some people prefer something that's much more face-to-face. I can't do that in Italy. It's not very convenient for me to go and stick posters on people's cars in Oxfordshire because the book's in Oxfordshire. So, you know, there are different ways of doing it, but work out what works for you and make a plan is what I would say. Definitely make a plan.
Fantastic. Well, that's been brilliant, Rachel. Thanks for your time. So where can people find you online?
Online I've got a website which is www.rachel-abbott.com. So that's BBT. And from there you can actually get to the blog as well. And it does actually list on the website everywhere that you can find the book, although obviously the book is Amazon, iTunes, Waterstones, Kobo, Barnes and Noble, all the usual places. But from the website you can find just about anything.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for your time.
It's a pleasure.